Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to
Oh, this is a good one.
yeah, that's going to be a really interesting one.
Yeah.
So today we're going to untangle the unsettling story of Robert Rembert,
Rembert.
an American serial killer
Yeah.
who managed to stay hidden in plain sight for years. You sent over some great material.
Great material.
And let me tell you this, robertrembert.pdf is a real eye-opener.
Yeah. It's
This
the.
guy was operating across state lines.
Oh, yeah. Across state
And
lines.
it's chilling how long he went undetected.
It really is, yeah. The thing about Rembert that is so fascinating and disturbing is how he exemplifies that duality we often see in serial killers.
Yeah.
On the surface, a seemingly ordinary life,
Right.
but underneath, a predator driven by dark compulsions.
Okay, so let's unpack this duality, starting with his early life.
Okay.
Rembert was born in Cleveland in 1970.
1970.
And while the sources are pretty scant on his childhood,
Right.
that lack of information almost adds to the mystery.
It really does. It's like we're trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah.
But even with this limited information, the question remains, were there any early indicators, any missed signs that hinted at the darkness to come? That's a question we'll keep circling back to as we dig deeper.
Right, because the first concrete glimpse into his violent nature comes in 1997
97?
with the shooting of Dadgen Lewis.
Dadgen Lewis.
Rembert successfully used a manslaughter defense, claiming it was an unintentional act during an argument. But to true crime fans like you, alarm bells are already going off, right?
Absolutely. And for good reason. This incident foreshadows a pattern of escalating violence,
Right.
which unfortunately isn't uncommon in serial killer profiles. While the legal system saw this as a crime of passion, it could also be interpreted as a test run, a way to exert control and see how far he could push the boundaries.
And he got away with it relatively unscathed, only searching 6 years.
6 years.
Released in 2010.
Okay.
He seemingly blends back into society, but this is where his choice of profession becomes significant. Almost chillingly strategic,
Yeah.
he becomes a truck driver.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, really?
This wasn't just a job for Rembert. It was an enabler.
Yeah.
Think about it. The open road anonymity, crossing state lines undetected.
Right.
It's practically a textbook setup for a mobile predator seeking new hunting grounds. We see this pattern in other serial killer cases, too. The utilization of a profession to provide cover and access to victims.
It's terrifying how a seemingly mundane job can become a tool for such darkness.
Right.
And it all comes to a head in 2015
Or 15.
with the discovery of 2 bodies in a Cleveland home.
Okay.
This time it's Morgan Neitzel.
Morgan Neitzel.
And shockingly, Jerry Rembert, Robert's own cousin who had been giving him a place to stay.
The murder of his own family member adds a chilling layer to this case.
Yeah.
It suggests a complete absence of empathy, a willingness to exploit even those closest to him. This level of detachment is a hallmark of many serial killers, allowing them to compartmentalize their actions and dehumanize their victims.
And to think, the dominoes start falling with something as routine as a traffic stop.
Oh, wow.
Remmer is pulled over driving Neitzel's SUV.
Really?
And that seemingly minor incident unravels everything.
It's a reminder that even the most meticulously crafted facades can crumble with the smallest trigger. But what really breaks this case wide open is the DNA evidence.
The DNA, it links Rembert to not only these murders, but to 2 other cold cases that had baffled investigators for years.
The power of DNA.
DNA technology has truly revolutionized crime solving, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's, yeah, 100%.
We're talking about Kimberly Hall, found beaten and raped in June 2015.
Okay.
And then there's Rita Mae Payne, murdered all the way back in 1997. Her case had gone cold until this DNA match.
It's a testament to the power of forensic science, especially when you're dealing with serial offenders. These individuals often believe they're smarter than the system, that they can outwit law enforcement. But DNA tells a story they can't erase. And in Rembert's case, it paints a picture of a brutal and opportunistic predator.
Right.
The randomness of his victims, the brutality of the crimes.
Right.
It all suggests a deep-seated compulsion to dominate and inflict pain.
And that brings us to another chilling detail, Rita Mae Payne's murder back in 1997.
Okay.
Remember, at this time, Rembert was a bus driver.
A bus driver.
He lured her into a public toilet at the bus station.
Oh my gosh. So he used his occupation as a cover, yet again.
Right.
This isn't just about convenience or opportunity, it's about power and control.
Yeah.
Rembert chose victims he perceived as vulnerable in locations where he felt a sense of authority. The bus station, a place of transit and anonymity.
Right.
It became his hunting ground.
It makes you wonder if this pattern of choosing victims he felt he could overpower goes all the way back to that first incident with Dadgen Lewis.
That's an excellent point, and it raises another chilling question. Could there be even more victims out there?
More victims.
Remember, authorities believe there might be, especially considering his years as a truck driver crisscrossing state lines, potentially expanding his hunting grounds far beyond Cleveland.
It's a truly unsettling thought, the possibility of more victims out there. But for now, let's shift gears and examine how the legal proceedings played out.
Okay, the legal proceedings.
Surprisingly, Rembert accepted a plea bargain,
A plea bargain.
confessing to all 5 murders and providing chilling details that cemented his guilt.
Plea bargains in cases like this are always complex. On one hand, they offer some semblance of justice and closure for the victims' families without the lengthy and often emotionally draining process of a trial.
Right.
But they also raise questions about whether the punishment truly fits the crime.
So in Rembert's case, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. During his sentencing, he made a statement expressing remorse and seeking forgiveness from the victims' families. What do you make of that? I mean, can someone capable of such calculated brutality genuinely feel remorse?
That's the million-dollar question in many serial killer cases, isn't it? It's almost impossible to know what's truly going on inside their minds. Some experts believe that expressions of remorse are simply a manipulative tactic to elicit sympathy and potentially reduce their sentence. Others argue that even individuals who commit heinous acts can experience genuine feelings of guilt and regret.
It's a debate that likely won't be settled anytime soon, but it adds another layer of complexity to this case, making us question everything we think we know about human nature. But, as we've been delving into Rembert's life and crimes, I keep coming back to the idea of missed opportunities.
Missed opportunities.
Could he have been stopped sooner?
Right.
Were there signs that were overlooked? Especially considering that first murder back in 1997?
That's a question that haunts not only this case, but countless others.
Right.
And with Rembert, it's particularly poignant. The manslaughter conviction, the relatively short sentence. It's hard not to wonder if the justice system failed to recognize the potential for escalating violence.
And it makes you wonder what measures could be taken to prevent similar tragedies in the future. I mean, is it even possible to predict with certainty which individuals might go on to commit such horrific acts?
That's the challenge, isn't it? There's no foolproof method for identifying potential serial killers.
Right.
But there are certain red flags, behavioral patterns, and psychological markers that experts have identified as potential warning signs.
So what are we talking about here? What kinds of red flags should we be aware of? I know our listeners are probably wondering the same thing, especially given Rembert's ability to blend in and appear so ordinary.
Well, some common red flags include a history of cruelty to animals, a fascination with fire setting, bedwetting that persists beyond a certain age, and what's known as the McDonald triad.
The McDonald triad. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. The McDonald triad refers to a cluster of 3 behaviors in childhood that have been linked to an increased risk of violent behavior later in life.
Okay.
These behaviors are animal cruelty, fire setting, and inercess, which is the involuntary urination, particularly bedwetting.
Okay.
Now, it's important to note that not everyone who exhibits these behaviors will go on to become a serial killer, but it's a pattern that has been observed in a number of cases.
That's really fascinating, and I think it speaks to the need for greater awareness and early intervention.
Right.
But it also raises ethical questions about labeling children based on certain behaviors.
Sure.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that these are just potential indicators, not guarantees. And any interventions should focus on providing support and addressing underlying issues, not on stigmatizing or predicting future criminal behavior.
Well said. And this brings us back to the complexity of Rembert's case. He was able to evade detection for so long.
Yeah.
Even with that early manslaughter conviction, it begs the question, how can we improve our systems for identifying and monitoring individuals who pose a potential threat to society, especially those who, like Rembert, exploit their professions for nefarious purposes?
That's a question that criminologists and law enforcement agencies are grappling with constantly. There's a growing awareness of the need for better information sharing between agencies, more comprehensive background checks, and perhaps even specialized units dedicated to tracking individuals with a history of violence or predatory behavior.
And of course, technology plays a crucial role.
Yeah.
We saw how DNA evidence ultimately brought Rembert to justice. Are there other technological advancements that could help prevent similar crimes from happening?
There's certainly a lot of promising research in the field of predictive policing, which uses data analysis and algorithms to identify high-risk areas and potentially even predict criminal behavior.
Right.
But this raises a whole host of ethical concerns about privacy, bias, and the potential for false positives.
It's like every step forward in technology brings new challenges and dilemmas, but I think the key takeaway here is that we need a multifaceted approach.
Right.
one that combines technological advancements with improved communication, better training for law enforcement, and a greater understanding of the psychological factors that contribute to violent behavior.
I completely agree. And equally important is the role of the community.
Oh, the community.
We need to create a culture where people feel comfortable reporting suspicious behavior,
Right.
where there's a sense of collective responsibility for safety and well-being.
That's a really important point. It takes a village, as they say. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored Rembert's crimes, the legal proceedings, the chilling possibility of more victims, the complexities of remorse, and the ongoing challenge of preventing similar tragedies in the future. It's been a heavy but incredibly insightful deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This case is a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places.
Yeah.
And it underscores the urgent need for greater awareness, improved systems for identifying and managing potential threats, and a commitment to creating a safer society for everyone.
And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a deeper understanding of this complex case. But more importantly, we hope it sparks some critical thinking about the bigger picture. How can we, as individuals and as a society, contribute to a world where tragedies like this are less likely to occur? That's the question we'll leave you with as we head into the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and crimes of Robert Rembert. We just left off talking about the possibility of more victims out there. Pretty disturbing stuff.
Yeah, truly unsettling thought.
But for our deep dive, let's shift gears a little bit and look more closely at the psychology behind Robert Rembert. What drove him to commit such horrific acts? Was it nature or nurture? A twisted upbringing or something inherently dark within him?
This is where things get really intriguing and honestly a bit unsettling.
Yeah,
We can analyze the facts of the case, the timeline of events, but understanding the inner workings of a serial killer's mind,
right.
that's a murky and often frustratingly incomplete puzzle. It's so easy to just label someone like Rembert as simply evil or monstrous,
Right.
but I think the more I learn about these cases, the more I realize it's rarely that simple.
It's very rarely that simple.
There are often complex psychological factors at play: trauma, personality disorders, distorted thinking patterns.
Exactly. And this is where diving into the limited information we have about Rembert's early life becomes crucial. Remember how we talked about those missing puzzle pieces? Even seemingly insignificant details could hold potential clues. Were there any history of abuse, neglect, or exposure to violence in his childhood? Were there any early signs of antisocial behavior or a lack of empathy?
Yeah, it's like we're trying to reconstruct a shattered mirror,
Yes,
trying to make sense of the fragments we have.
right.
And even if we had a complete picture of his childhood, there's still no guarantee we could pinpoint a single cause for his descent into darkness.
That's the challenge with these cases. Human behavior is complex,
Yeah.
and there's rarely a single explanation for why someone becomes a serial killer. It's often a combination of factors: biological predispositions, psychological vulnerabilities, and environmental triggers,
Right.
all interacting in a perfect storm of sorts.
So with Rembert, we see those triggers potentially playing out in his choice of victims, his use of his profession as a means of control,
Right.
and even the escalation of violence over time. It's like each crime fed his dark desires, pushing him further down a path of no return.
And it's worth noting that while we often focus on childhood experiences, adult traumas and life stressors can also contribute to a descent into violence. Was there a significant event in Rembert's life that might have acted as a breaking point, a catalyst for his later crimes? These are the kinds of questions investigators and forensic psychologists grapple with when trying to understand the motivations behind serial killings.
It's a puzzle with incredibly high stakes and unfortunately one that we may never fully solve.
Right.
But the pursuit of understanding, the attempt to unravel the psychology of individuals like Rembert, that's crucial, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's not about excusing or justifying their actions, but about gaining insights that might help us prevent future tragedies.
Right.
The more we learn about the risk factors, the warning signs, the psychological patterns,
Right.
the better equipped we are to identify potential threats and intervene before it's too late.
And for our listener, who I know is deeply engaged in the world of true crime, this is where your expertise comes in.
Yes.
We've laid out the facts of the case, explored various theories, and highlighted the complexities of Rembert's psychology. But now we turn it over to you. What resonates with you? What connections are you making? Are there any other serial killer cases that come to mind that share similar patterns or psychological profiles?
That's the beauty of deep dives like this. It's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively engaging with it,
Right.
drawing your own conclusions, and contributing to the ongoing conversation. Because ultimately, the more we understand about the dark side of human nature, the better equipped we are to combat it.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the unsettling world of Robert Rembert. We've journeyed from his seemingly ordinary beginnings to the depths of his depravity, exploring the crimes, the psychology, and the lingering questions that continue to fascinate and haunt us.
We hope this exploration has been both informative and thought-provoking, leaving you with a deeper understanding of this complex case and the broader implications for our understanding of criminal behavior.
And to you, our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep sharing your insights with the world. Because the pursuit of knowledge, especially in the face of darkness, is a powerful tool for creating a safer and more just world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Welcome back to our deep dive into the unsettling story of Robert Rembert. We've covered a lot of ground, from his chilling crimes to the psychology behind serial killers. But for this last part, I think there's one more piece of this puzzle that we need to try to understand. And that's the role of Rembert's plea bargain. He confessed to all 5 murders. He even provided chilling details that left no doubt about his guilt. Why would he do that?
Well, plea bargains, especially in cases like this, they're always a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
On the one hand, they provide a sense of closure for the victims' families. They spare everyone the ordeal of a lengthy trial.
right.
But they also raise questions about whether justice is truly served. Is a plea bargain a way to hold a perpetrator accountable? Or is it a way for them to potentially escape the full weight of their crimes?
That's a great question. And in Rembert's case, he was sentenced to life in prison
Life in prison.
with the possibility of parole after 30 years. But during his sentencing, he actually made a statement. He expressed remorse, sought forgiveness from the families of his victims.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
Because it makes you wonder, can someone who committed such calculated, brutal acts genuinely feel remorse?
It's a question that has haunted me throughout our deep dive.
It's a question that has haunted criminologists and psychologists few years.
Yeah, is it a genuine expression of guilt or just a calculated tactic?
Right.
A way to maybe manipulate the system? I don't think there's an easy answer. I mean, human beings are complex.
We are complex.
And the motivations behind such horrific acts are often even more so.
Absolutely. And it's something that true crime enthusiasts grapple with all the time.
Right.
Trying to understand that dark side of human nature, what drives a person to commit such atrocities. It's unsettling, but it's also what makes these cases so compelling, right? The desire to understand, to piece together the puzzle, to maybe even find some meaning in the midst of such senseless violence.
And I think that's what we've tried to do in our deep dive today, to shed some light on the dark world of Robert Rembert. We've explored his crimes, we've delved into his psyche, and we've wrestled with the ethical and societal implications of his case. What are your final thoughts as we wrap up our exploration of this complex and disturbing case?
My final thought is that cases like Robert Rembert's serve as a chilling reminder that evil can lurk anywhere. It can hide behind a seemingly ordinary facade. It can blend into the background noise of everyday life. But it's our responsibility as individuals and as a society to be vigilant, to be informed, and to never stop questioning. Because only by understanding the darkness can we truly hope to combat it.
Well said. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unsettling world of Robert Rembert. We encourage you to continue exploring, continue questioning, and continue engaging in the conversation. Because the pursuit of knowledge, especially in the face of darkness, is a powerful tool for creating a safer and more just world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.